Okay, so hey class, I wanted to take time to share my summary of my intercultural contextualization paper, um, and basically just kind of give you some of the takeaways from my project, and explain kind of the process that I went through for my project. And the focus of our home church analysis, I used the church that my wife and I planted that we're pastoring, and um, and just our experience and our context over the life of our ministry. And that context has changed over the years, with the ebbs and flow of ministry. But our primary context has been reaching out to historically black colleges and universities, and also engaging black communities, and the intersection between these particular communities. And then more recently, that's included engaging the Stone Mountain community, which has a fairly diverse black population among the Africans, African Americans, Afro Caribbeans, which is interesting because that tended to be the mix of people that we engaged on college campuses. And so, our church has really had a focus on engaging the African diaspora, not only here in the States, but then even internationally, going and ministering to them. So with that understanding, we have been a church that has been multi-ethnic within, the black diaspora, which when you come into our church, you look at it, it can appear to be mono-ethnic. But culturally, there are some huge differences that impact the way that we worship and how we gather. That if you again, if you're looking from the outside in, you may not necessarily notice those particular differences. And so basically, our church has been in existence for about 15 years. We have a diverse mix of people, even though they share complexion. Culturally, there are some vast differences. We're unique in the sense that there's a good mix of socioeconomic status, but age-wise, we are pretty much a millennial church, millennial and Gen Z church. We're younger, and so we don't have some of the challenges that we've talked about in our class with historically black churches, in the sense that we've created these barriers, and I think that has played a role in our ability to engage in some of the issues of contextualization that we've talked about in our class, particularly as it relates to cultural sanctification and our cultural consciousness, and even prioritizing the marginalized, and how do we do that, and then finally the idea of partnering with indigenous leaders. I think because we are my roots are in the historically black church. I grew up in the AME church, and then I was a part of a non-denominational church that had many different black ethnicities within it. And then I moved into this context of engaging HBCUs, where you have all these different people coming together. So that formed the background and the framework for our church. But it also, I think, it enabled us to overcome some of the barriers, the invisible barriers that are put in place when you start talking about the marginalized, and keeping them from being able to be involved in the church. We actually made it our goal to include, this is where we talk about the cultural sanctification side of things. We included aspects from Black community, like wearing fitted hats and wearing urban gear, doing spoken word and different things like that to express the gospel in a language that was contextualized for the people that we were reaching out to. And so I think that has been, as I did my analysis, I'm realizing how important that has been to our effectiveness as a church. Whereas we do a lot of consulting work with historically Black churches that are aging, that are growing older, that are they're closing their doors, and one of the elements, and again, Mom here, Bantu explain this, is that the barriers that are there culturally and socioeconomically that were in place, that have hindered and kept people on the outside, we can see a glaring difference in when we embrace those ideas, how we've had success, and when these traditional churches haven't embraced them and they've kind of set up classism, how that has been a problem. So that kind of gives you some of the context and the background just of our church and where we've come from and how we relate. And so I think, again, when we talk about cultural sanctification, our values on indigenous leadership, our values on contextualization, our values on prioritizing the marginalized, in many ways has and our intentionality of emerging people from different socioeconomic classes has helped us to cross a lot of those borders. And yes, even though it was in the microcosm of HBCU experience, where these are college students, they're coming from these different backgrounds, and we're implanting in them, in their minds, this idea that it is normal, it is normative for people from different backgrounds to work together and to express the gospel in culturally relevant language. That is impactful. And so what has happened from that is that we see these people that are being discipled, and they're going out and they're reproducing that in different communities. So that was just it. Overall, it was just interesting to see how, as I went through this analysis of our home church, how we kind of intuitively implemented some of these ideas of cultural sanctification. Now, the next thing when we talk about in our analysis, looking at cultural consciousness, part of our church is called Convergence Church. And so part of our mission and our goal is in addressing the Black community. We realize that you cannot address issues related to Black people without also addressing the issues of white supremacy, white culture, and other people groups that have been impacted by white culture and white Christianity. And so, as I was looking at that, we have been intentional about doing things like putting on conferences where we bring together people across denominations, across different cultural backgrounds and ministry expressions. And so because of that, I do think that's created a greater cultural awareness and consciousness that may not necessarily be as intuitive or as natural for other churches that maybe come from more of a mono-ethnic culture. But again, it was intentionality to prioritize these relationships across cultures. And so, but with that saying, I think there is a great deal that we have to learn in addressing people of other ethnicities, especially in our context. We're starting to interact with more of an immigrant population and people that are refugees as they're shifting from Clarkston to the Stone Mountain area. And so we're having to develop a new level of cultural intelligence in order to say, how do we as a Black diaspora church engage people that are from differing backgrounds, and how do we serve them and meet their needs? So that's an area I do think that we can grow in, and serving the needs of people that are not included in, again, that Black diaspora. When it comes to prioritizing the marginalized, and I alluded to this earlier, I think we have done a pretty significant job of being intentional about empowering people that are living in the margins, particularly as it relates to, our mission as a movement is to empower generational influencers and to launch them from college campuses to inner cities to the ends of the earth. And so you see this intentionality of engaging these different contexts, and within those contexts, we have a focus on empowering people that are on all in all places of the spectrum, whether they're highly educated and come from affluent backgrounds to people that have less education, that are living in, lower income communities, that are living in the hoods, that are, carrying guns. I mean, we've had everybody as a part of our church and ministry at some point in time. And so, and the cool thing, I think, is that our leadership reflects people that have come from those backgrounds. If you look at our leadership, we've got a guy that used to be homeless, that is a part of our core team leader. We've got people that have come from single parent households. At times, we've had people that have dealt with all kinds of struggles, and that have come from foster care families, that have come from low income families, but also that have come from, generational success in the sense of financially and different things like that. But we've brought them all together, and we're leading and engaging people in these various contexts. And so I think there is a focus on prioritizing the marginalized. And even now, as we're engaging Stone Mountain, one of the things we wanted to research is what are some of the greatest needs. And so right now, what that looks like is, single mothers, and their vulnerability in our current economic conditions, and just not having a lot of these young ladies. They don't have extended family, and so they're vulnerable to be taken advantage of. And so we're looking at ways of empowering them, and I'm excited about empowering a lot of these young ladies to become leaders in our church, and to empower them and equip them to plant churches and gospel communities as well. And I think that ties into, partnering with Indigenous leaders and finding out from these young ladies and from these people that are living in the margins, how do we best serve your community? And we've started to provide resources that empower them with skills to engage the community, and to lead gospel expressions, and to live lives that are flourishing. So overall, I think what this project has done is it has helped us to see where we're on track and hitting the goals, but then it also is helping us to narrow our focus and think of ways that we can continue to sanctify our culture, how we can continue to prioritize and marginalize, and partner with Indigenous leaders, as well as in what areas we need to grow in our cultural consciousness. And then for the last part, our program, our project with our host church, was um, basically a couple of they were church planners. Now they are part of a local church that's been called Grantswood Baptist Church in Irondale, Alabama, and it's a Southern Baptist church that is predominantly white, living in community that's changing around it, and it's a smaller congregation, but they are trying to make efforts to become more multi-ethnic. And so what we did for our project was we decided to do a church planting simulation. And we said, if we were going to choose to plant a church, between the two of us, Pastor Clayton and his wife, and then me and my wife, if we were to plant a church together to be an expression of a multi-ethnic church, what would that look like? What are some of the things that we would need to address? What are some of the issues that we need to work through? And what stuck out to me the most about that conversation was, number one, my wife and Pastor Clayton's wife's ability to recognize the power of reaching out to single moms and moms in general as a strategy for planting gospel communities. In any community, but particularly when you start talking about dealing with marginalized peoples, and how motherhood in many ways transcends culture, and it creates a commonality between these different cultures. And if you can create a place for women to gather to talk about being moms, then you have that ability to interact beyond just some of the cultural norms that different groups may be stuck in. So that was pretty neat. But then the second thing that was powerful, I asked the question about what leadership would look like, and Pastor Clayton, he said that he really feels strongly that if we were to plant a church, that I would be, as a black man, that I would need to be the lead pastor, number one. And number two, that him as a white man would really need to play a supporting role. And then number three, we'd have to be intentional about adding other ethnic groups, or people groups, people of color, to our leadership team to reflect the community that we're going into. And so it's not often that you hear white leaders say, hey, you need to lead and I will follow, and get behind you and support you. So that was really neat. But then the next thing I asked him, what would your expectation be of me as a black man leading a multi-ethnic church? What would your expectations be? And the first thing he said was that I would expect you to lead us from your place of experience, from your cultural reality, and to teach us about what that's been like, so that we can understand and we can learn, and that we can better relate to our brothers and sisters. And I think that was really, really significant. And then his wife mentioned that not only would we expect you to lead from that place, but then also be able to help tie in narratives of other people groups that have traditionally been oppressed in America by white supremacy and white culture, and help teach us all how to lament that. How do we lament that and grow together? So that was a very, very powerful experience. And again, it was something that, when I look at our church and I look at our movement, it lets me know that, hey, you know what, we are moving in the right direction. But then also to think about how do we intentionally add different, more dimensions of cultural diversity, and cross-cultural engagement. And so overall, this project has been encouraging. It's been enlightening, It has been one that has shown us, hey, this is where we're doing well, and here's some areas that we can grow in. And so I'm excited about implementing some of the things that we've learned. Thanks for taking time to listen to my summary, my recap. Hopefully it's been informative and it's been a blessing to you.